Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Steve Sachs from Los Angeles Valley College, and I'm creating a video primarily for my CAOT 85 class, which is in Microsoft Excel, about how Microsoft filters work. But this is very interesting. This same filtering concept also works in other areas of Microsoft, for example, for Microsoft Access. So even though it might look different on the screen, the concepts of filtering are the same pretty much throughout Microsoft applications. This is a simple and pretty common setup to describe how Microsoft Excel filters or Microsoft filters work. Notice that we have a little table here of raw data with three field names: name, IQ, and born, where the people were born. We have an area for criteria ranges or criterion ranges, and I'll talk about those in a moment, and then an extract range. And the easiest way to set up an extract range is to include the field names and just make that the extract range. The way to understand the filters is to understand that there are rows below the field names in the criterion range. For example, here are the three field names in the criterion range. So this would be the first row below the field names. These two would be the first two rows below the criterion range, and so forth. We're going to think about rows below the field names in the criterion range. The simple answer of how filters work, no matter how complex they are, is this. For any row in the criterion range that has something in it, a record can get through the criterion range and appear in the result only by making it through that row. Here's an example. I'm going to put in the name Mary in the first row of the criterion range area. I'm going to begin to set up a filtering operation by going to Data and Advanced. I want to make sure that the computer understands where my raw data are. This says A8 to C18, and sure enough, A8 to C18 includes all of my data as well as the field names. My current criteria range that I have already set up is E8 to G9. That is, I'll do it again, that is here. That includes the first row of field names and then the first row. So right now we have only one pathway into the result because there's only one row below the field names that has something in it. In the row that's below Mary that I had typed in here, there is nothing. And right here I'm telling the computer I'm going to have to change those names because it's going to confuse people. Damn. Let's just focus now on the criterion range and how the criterion range is used in filtering. The criterion range has a row of field names, as I have here, and then one or more rows below it. The way the Excel filters work is that any row that has something in it is a possible pathway of a record to make it into the result, to make it into the extract range if we're showing our result in an extract range, or to make it into the filtered raw data table. The trick is you have to follow each record from left to right through all rows that have something in them to figure out how it's going to work. So in my example, I have only one row in the criterion range below the field names, Mary, and that means that the name will have to match Mary for a record to make it through the filter. So let's look at the first record, Fred 100 in California. This record starts from left to right. We're going to try to make it through the filter from here to there. It gets stopped right there because Fred doesn't match Mary. So that record will not make it into the filter. Let's go to the next record. This one is Mary 85 in Michigan. Mary makes it through, and there's nothing else to stop that record. So Mary's record will make it into the filter. None of the others will because none of the others are Mary. So let's actually implement this. We're going to create an extract using the criterion range of these data. The field names of name, IQ, and born, and Mary being the only way that a record can make it through. So I'm going to start with an active cell inside the data. That's absolutely the best way to start to do an advanced filter. I'm going to click on advanced and I'm going to say copy to another location here. That's just because we're going to be using an extract range. The list range the computer has guessed is from A8 to C18. That is correct. That's the field names and then the data down to C18. The criteria range, I need to tell the computer how many rows how many rows I'm actually using for criteria. You always have to include the field names, and we're going to include the field names and the first row, which has Mary in it. So it says frog E8 to G9, and it says frog just because I happen to name this worksheet frog. That's why it says frog there. Don't be thrown off. And here where it says copy to, I'm going to make that the extract range. So I'll just fill in the extract range, which is the sheet frog. It's called frog from I8 to K8. And I'm going to click OK, and you can see that the only record that made it through was the one that said Mary, IQ 85, and MI. Because of all the records that tried to make it through this row, that's the only operable row because it's the only row that has anything in it, Mary was the only one that matched. Now, I'm going to change Mary to Bobby, and I am going to run this. I'm going to run the filter again. Right now it still says Mary and 85 and MI because that's from the prior run. So let's run it again. And this time Bobby's going to be in here. And I hope what you predict is that when we run this, the extract range is going to show Bobby, 20, and New York because that's the only Bobby in this list. So let me go to advanced. Copy to another location. First of all, let's confirm the extract range is A8 to C18. That is correct. The criteria range E8 to G9. E8 to G9 is correct. It's going to copy to I8 to K8. That is the extract range, which is correct. So let's see what happens when I click OK. Now we have Bobby, 20, and New York. It worked. Now let's make it a little more interesting. I am going to change this record. So instead of being Anna, her name is now Bobby. And rerun the filter. We now have two Bobbies, even though the criteria range is just here. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to clear this out so it's more obvious. I'm going to rerun this filter now and see what happens, knowing that we have two Bobbies here. So we're in on the data tab, the sort and filter command group. We're going to go to advanced. We're going to copy to another location. The list range A8 to C18 is correct. I'm rechecking that each time because this can really screw up if you have something wrong. Criteria range E8 to G9 is correct. Copy to I8 to K8. You always just indicate up here, don't include a certain number of rows because you might eclipse results. And now I'm going to click OK, and we got two of them, because there are two Bobbies there. So all records tried, let's look at the criterion range. All records tried to make it from left to right in this row. There's only one row that's operating because there's only one row with something in it. And we got two Bobbies here because there are two Bobbies. Hillary didn't make it through with an IQ of 5 from Illinois. I'll just give you a moment to digest that. And but the Bobbies made it through. Now let's make it a little more interesting. I'm now going to make it what's called an OR condition. An OR condition means that if you meet this criterion, you can make it into the result, or if you meet this different criterion, you can make it into the result. To do an OR, I need to add at least one additional row to the criterion range. So this criterion range in English says anybody named Bobby, put them in the result. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say anybody named Bobby or anybody with an IQ of 110, put them in the result. So I'm now going to have to include all of this, which is 2 rows below the field names, in our criterion range. And when I do that, A record will try to make it through the top row. If the name is Bobby, they'll make it through. But what if the name is not Bobby? Then they try the next row that has anything in it. This row has something in it. So somebody with an IQ of 110 could also make it through. So let's see what happens. I'm going to make my active cell one of the active cells in the raw data. I'm going to go to advanced. I'm going to say copy to another location. All this does, copy to another location, is it lets me specify the copy to or the criterion range. Okay, so let's confirm. A8 to C18 should be the list or the data. A8 to C18 is correct. Criteria range, E8 to G9? No. I need to include this second row now. So it's A8 to G10. In other words, it needs to be not this, but instead all of this, because I now need to include that second row, because this is an OR condition. They need to be named Bobby or have an IQ of 110, and then they can get into our result. And the extract range I8 to K8 stays the same. So let's run it. And here we have both Bobbies. We saw them before. But look, we also have Ichabod. How did Ichabod get in? Because Ichabod has an IQ of 110. Fred couldn't make it through the filter. Let's look at this one. Can't make it through. Fred tries to get through the first row. Can't do it. It's Bobby. Fred tries to get through the second row. Can't do it. His IQ is 100, not 110. So Fred doesn't get in because there are only two possible pathways, this one, and Fred didn't make it. Mary didn't make it. Ichabod tries to get through the first row. Cannot make it because Ichabod does not match Bobby. Ichabod tries to get through the second row, and here we go. Ichabod has an IQ of 110, so Ichabod made it through, and Ichabod is in the extract range. So this is a logical OR. That is, anybody named Bobby or anybody with an IQ of 110. So this is a slightly more complex criterion range. Now what I'm going to do for just a moment is I'm going to change the criterion range a little bit, and then I want you to look at it and pause the computer and see if you can predict what data will appear in the extract range. So I'm going to make a little change here. And I'll tell you that when I create my criterion range, it's going to be all of these. There are 3 pathways in. Pause your computer now and try to figure out who is everybody who's going to appear in our extract range. Pause it now. I'll be quiet for a moment, and then I'm going to start up again. Okay. I am now going to run the complex filter, and then we'll discuss the outcome. So I'm going to have to change my criterion range from last time. My last one was just these rows. I'm going to have to add another row, and you'll see me do that in a minute. So I'm going to go to Advanced. I'm going to go to Copy to another location. That's just so we can get the results down here. List range A8 to C18. Double check. Yes, A8 to C18 is correct. Criteria range E8 to G10. No. I need to include another row, so it's going to be E8 to G11. I can either, well, what I'm going to do this time is just click down here and change the 10 to an 11. I could also have deleted the whole thing and just clicked and dragged and respecified the whole thing. And the extract range always remains I8 to K8. So here we go. Did you predict that? I'm not concerned now with the order that people appear. We have 2 Bobbies, because they made it through the first row. We have, who's got an IQ of 110? Ichabod. Ichabod made it through the second row, and Hillary made it through the third row. So you can have multiple criteria based on the same field name. So in English, let's say your boss says to you, I want to see a list of everybody named Bobby, or if they have an IQ of either 110 or 5, I want to see them also. And that produces this result. Now let's get more involved. First of all, I'm going to get rid of this. And I'm going to do a logical AND. We have a logical OR so far. If you have more than one row operating, you have a logical OR. Now we're going to do a logical AND. You'll notice we have two Bobbies, one with an IQ of 20 and one with an IQ of 69. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 69 up here in IQ. How many rows do I have that are possible pathways into the result of this? Only one. This is the only row that a record can get through, the way I currently have it. And I'm going to specify my criteria range or criterion range as just these two. But a record has to not only have the name of Bobby, but we're working left to right. After they have the name of Bobby, they have to have an IQ of 69. This is an and. Your boss says to you, show me everybody on the list whose name is Bobby and has an IQ of 69. You have a logical and condition if you have more than one criterion in the same row of the criterion range. So here we go. I'm going to run it. We're going to go advanced. I'm going to copy to another location just to get it down here into the extract range. Let's see if A8 to C18 is correct for the data. A8 to C18 is correct. Criteria range, E8 to G11. No, now I have to change the criteria range. It's E8 to G9. So I'm just going to respecify it by going here. I just want one operating row and extract I8 to K8. That's what I want. Here we go. Only one record makes it through. Even though there's another Bobby here, this record could not make it through going left to right. Why? Bobby matched, that's good. IQ, no. This IQ is 69, this one's 20, so this record could not make it through. Now let's get just a little more complicated. Let me decide how to do this to you. All right, here we go. Our criterion range is going to be this. In English, what I'd like you to do now is actually pause the playback and see if you can write down in English what you're going to get if you run this as your criterion range. So I'll give you a moment to do that. Pause it and then start up again. Okay, we're back. This criterion range says, or your boss says to you, give me this, show me a list of this from all of our data. Any Bobby with an IQ of 69, or if they're born in California, include them too. This has an and plus an or. You have to be Bobby and IQ of 69 to get it through, or you have to be born in California. So here we go. I'm just going to wipe this one out from the prior run, and we're going to go again. Advanced, copy to another location. Let's see, is A8 to C18 correct for our data? A8 to C18 is correct. Criteria range, E8 to G9. No, we need E8 to G10 now because I'm going to be including the California row. So I'm going to wipe that out and respecify. And copy to I8 to K8, which is fine. And here we go. And here we go. We have Fred. Fred made it through, but Fred's name isn't Bobby, and Fred doesn't have an IQ of 69. Why? Because Fred is from California. So Fred made it through the second row. Billy, 95 in California, made it through the second row because he's from California. Both Bobbies didn't make it through. The Bobby with an IQ of 69 made it through, but the other Bobby with an IQ of 20 didn't make it through because the Bobby with an IQ of 20 couldn't make it through this first row because the IQ didn't match. Louise got through because Louise is from California. So this is a complex filter that has both an and an or. You either have to be a Bobby and IQ of 69 and you get through, or born in California. Now, you can get extremely complicated with these things, but this is the basic idea of how Excel and Access and other Microsoft filters work. One last thing, just for the people who want to see this. I'm going to run this same filter again, but instead of going to an extract range, we'll just filter in place. So I'm going to click here to begin. I've got to make sure you click only one cell. I'm going to go to Advanced. I'm going to filter the list in place this time instead of copying to another location. That just means that these records are going to be shrunk to the result, and we're not going to use an extract range. You see that's grayed out? The extract range is grayed out because we're not actually going to use it. A8 to C18 are the raw data, yes. Criteria E8 to G10, yes. I'm using the same criteria as last time, and I'm going to go OK. And now, here we go. We have the same data that appeared in the extract range before because I filtered in place. By the way, one of the ways you can tell that you filtered in place is that the row numbers of the results are blue. I hope you can see that they're blue instead of black. More interestingly down, oh, you can't see it on your screen, but in the lower left corner of your status bar, it tells you how many records you got. So that is how the Excel filters work. The big trick is how many rows of the criterion range have something in them. And if one row has more than one thing in it, you have a logical and, this and that, or the record doesn't get through. If you have two or more rows, you have a logical or, because they can get through one row or the other row. And that encapsulates a pretty complicated concept. But if you can nail this, you're going to be just a master of Excel filters. Good luck to you. Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Steve Sachs from Los Angeles Valley College, and I'm creating a video primarily for my CAOT 85 class, which is in Microsoft Excel, about how Microsoft filters work. But this is very interesting. This same filtering concept also works in other areas of Microsoft, for example, for Microsoft Access. So even though it might look different on the screen, the concepts of filtering are the same pretty much throughout Microsoft applications. Oh, it's got frogging on there. Here I'm showing you a worksheet that has some raw data, in this case some names, some IQ scores, and states in which these people are supposedly born. And nothing's in any particular order. And then a criterion range to the right. Microsoft calls it a criteria range inaccurately because the word criteria is plural, and you can set just one criterion and have this work. Also, even though my criterion range has all three field names, namely name, IQ, and born, you can construct a criterion range with only one field name. I just happen to have all three, and usually it's easier to do that. Here's the main concept of how criterion ranges work. Every row beneath the field names, so for example, here is the first cell of the first row, every row below the field names is a possible route into the result. By the result, I mean either, if you're filtering the range in place, what will be left over in the raw data table, or if you create an extract range someplace elsewhere on your screen, then the result is the data that appear in the extract range once the filter is applied. So every row below the field name row that has something in it is a potential route into the results. So if you have only one row with something in it, there's only one possible route into the results. For example, if in name I type Mary and insert that, then the only records that would result from running this filter is the ones that have Mary as the name, and this would be row 10. I need to actually make this work. So we're going to make a little pause or a stop. Do a pause. The basic operation of a filter works like this. We're going to take a look at this criterion range. You'll notice that the criterion range has the field names just like the extract range has the field names. The deal is that the criterion range and the extract range don't have to have the same field names as exist in the raw data. Here are our raw data and here are the field names. You can actually put fewer field names in and you can put them in any order you want. But just to make it easier, I've got the same three field names in the raw data, the criterion range, and the extract range. When I speak of a row in the criterion range, I'm talking about rows that are below the field name rows. So for example, this row would be the first row. These two rows would be, well, the first two rows. So we are not paying attention to the actual field names when I talk about rows in the criterion range. Here we go. This is a simple and pretty common setup to describe how Microsoft Excel filters or Microsoft filters work. Notice that we have a little table here of raw data with three field names, name, IQ, and born, where the people were born. We have an area for criteria ranges or criterion ranges, and I'll talk about those in a moment, and then an extract range. And the easiest way to set up an extract range is to include the field names and just make that the extract range. The way to understand the filters is to understand that there are rows below the field names in the criterion range. For example, here are the three field names in the criterion range. So this would be the first row below the field names. These two would be the first two rows below the criterion range, and so forth. We're going to think about rows below the field names in the criterion range. The simple answer of how filters work, no matter how complex they are, is this. For any row in the criterion range that has something in it, a record can get through the criterion range and appear in the result only by making it through that row. Here's an example. I'm going to put in the name Mary in the first row of the criterion range area. I'm going to begin to set up a filtering operation by going to Data and Advanced. I want to make sure that the computer understands where my raw data are. This says A8 to C18, and sure enough, A8 to C18 includes all of my data as well as the field names. My current criteria range that I have already set up is E8 to G9. That is, I'll do it again, that is here. That includes the first row of field names and then the first row. So right now we have only one pathway into the result because there's only one row below the field names that has something in it. In the row that's below Mary that I had typed in here, there is nothing. And right here I'm telling the computer I'm going to have to change those names because it's going to confuse people.